December 13, 1937. Nanking, China. The ancient city burns under a crimson sky as Imperial Japanese forces pour through the shattered gates like a black tide of vengeance. In a small room above a bombed-out pharmacy, Oberleutnant Karl Weiss of the German Wehrmacht sits hunched over a leather journal, his hands trembling as he writes by candlelight. Outside, the screams of civilians echo through streets littered with bodies and abandoned belongings. Today I witnessed something that will haunt me until my final breath, Karl writes, his pen scratching against paper stained with ash and tears. The soldiers I trained, the Japanese officers who called me sensei, they have become something unrecognizable, something inhuman. I came to China to teach the art of war, but what I see now is not war. It is the systematic extermination of innocence itself. The sound of heavy boots echoes up the wooden stairs. Karl quickly closes the journal and slides it beneath loose floorboards, his heart pounding as Japanese voices grow louder in the hallway. Through his cracked window, he watches as a young Chinese nurse is dragged from a makeshift hospital, her white uniform torn and bloodied, her eyes wide with terror that will forever burn in his memory. This is not the story they taught in history books. This is not the sanitized version of political alliances and military strategy. This is the classified truth of how one German officer found himself trapped between duty and conscience, between honor and horror, in the darkest chapter of human brutality. Before we dive into this buried truth, make sure you subscribe, because some stories can only be told when the last witness is gone, and their voices can finally speak freely. ## The Gathering Storm. Karl Weiss had arrived in Nanking 18 months earlier, in June 1936, as part of Germany's military advisory mission to China. At 28 years old, he was a rising star in the Wehrmacht, fluent in Japanese from his time studying at the Berlin Oriental Institute, and chosen specifically for his expertise in modern infantry tactics. His mission was clear: train Chinese nationalist forces in German military doctrine to help them resist the growing Japanese threat. But as Karl settled into his quarters in the international safety zone, he found himself caught in a web of shifting alliances that would define the coming war. Adolf Hitler's Germany was secretly supporting China with weapons and advisors while simultaneously courting Japan as a potential ally against the Soviet Union. It was a diplomatic tightrope walk that would soon collapse into chaos. The Chinese officers Karl worked with were eager students, desperate to modernize their army against the technologically superior Japanese Imperial Army. General Tang Xingji, commander of Nanking's defenses, had requested German assistance specifically because of their proven effectiveness against superior forces. Karl spent his days teaching Chinese soldiers how to use the Kar-98K rifle, how to coordinate artillery strikes, and how to establish defensive positions using German tactical manuals. "The Chinese have courage," Karl wrote in his first letter home to his sister Maria in Munich. "They lack modern equipment and training, but their determination to defend their homeland reminds me of our own struggles after the Great War. I believe we can help them become a formidable force." What Karl didn't know was that 200 miles to the east, Colonel Kenji Tanaka was preparing the 6th Division of the Japanese Imperial Army for what would become known as the Nanking Campaign. Tanaka, a graduate of the Imperial Japanese Army Academy and a fervent believer in Emperor Hirohito's divine mission to create the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, viewed the Chinese not as fellow Asians to be liberated, but as obstacles to Japanese destiny. "The Chinese have forgotten their place in the natural order," Tanaka told his officers during a briefing in Shanghai in November 1937. "They have been poisoned by Western ideas of equality and democracy. It is our sacred duty to remind them that the Japanese race is destined to lead Asia into a new age of prosperity." Tanaka's forces were equipped with the latest Japanese military technology: Type 89 Igo medium tanks, Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters for air support, and the deadly Type 38 Arisaka rifle that could accurately hit targets at 460 meters. But more importantly, they were indoctrinated with a Bushido code that had been twisted into something far removed from its honorable origins. A code that saw surrender as the ultimate shame and treated enemy civilians as less than human. As autumn turned to winter in 1937, the signs of approaching disaster multiplied. Japanese bombers, their engines droning like mechanical thunder, began regular raids on Nanking's airfields and military installations. The Chinese Air Force, equipped with outdated biplanes and a handful of Curtiss Hawk fighters, was quickly overwhelmed. Carl watched from the city walls as smoke columns rose from bombed factories and residential districts, knowing that each explosion brought the Japanese army closer to the ancient capital. In the city's hospitals and aid stations, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Lin Mei, a 24-year-old nurse trained at the Jinling Women's College, had volunteered to remain in Nanking despite the approaching danger. Her parents had fled west with the retreating government, begging her to come with them, but Lin Mei felt a duty to the wounded soldiers and civilians who couldn't evacuate. "Someone must stay," she told her friend Chen Wei as they prepared medical supplies in the basement of the central hospital. "If we all run, who will care for those who cannot run?" Lin Mei had studied some German during her medical training, and she had encountered Carl several times when he visited wounded Chinese soldiers. She found the German officer different from what she expected. Thoughtful, respectful, clearly troubled by the approaching violence. Unlike many foreign advisors who treated Chinese people as exotic curiosities, Carl seemed to genuinely care about the fate of the people he had come to help. "Herr Oberleutnant," she had said to him in broken German during one of his hospital visits, "you should leave soon. When the Japanese come, they will not distinguish between Chinese and foreign friends of China." Carl had looked at her with eyes that seemed older than his years. "And you, Fräulein Lin? Will you leave?" "This is my home," she replied simply. "These are my people. I cannot abandon them." That conversation haunted Carl as December 1937 arrived and the sound of artillery grew closer each day. On December 9th, Japanese forces completely surrounded Nanking, cutting off all escape routes. General Tang Xingji made a desperate radio broadcast calling for last-ditch resistance, but Carl could see the defeat in the Chinese commander's eyes. The German-trained defensive positions were well constructed, but they were designed to delay a conventional army, not to stop the fanatical tide that was approaching.